Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations Podcast. I'm honored to be joined by none other than Mr. Ben Ward of the infamous British heavy metal stoner doom band Orange Goblin. Ben is also a booking agent for Route 1 Booking and works with various different bands all across the spectrum. And him and I got to discuss a lot of very interesting topics on this podcast. Predominantly, of course, just simply covering our passion for the heavy metal culture and different aspects of that, the past and the future of this genre, and certain general characteristics that we have in common, despite coming from very different backgrounds. Obviously, with him being a part of the scene since over 3 decades ago, and obviously myself being a part of the same culture, however, coming up in Iran, of all places. So we got to discuss a lot of that, and it was a very interesting conversation that we both had as fanatics of this culture, and by this I mean the heavy metal culture, of course. But one very important aspect of this episode that I've been very excited to bring to you guys was the fact that we got to discuss certain things such as the personal transformation that Ben has been through. So in the last year or two, he has made a lot of very positive shifts in his lifestyle. He has lost a ton of weight, got his diet in check, and got into fitness, became sober. Things that, of course, don't always necessarily align with being heavy metal. However, I think that these are things that, if you are, of course, not new to the podcast, you already know that these are things that I talk about quite frequently. And I think that there's a lot to gain inspiration from with this particular episode. If you're already someone who follows a similar path, then perhaps you can find things that you have in common with Ben, and of course myself included there. Or at the very least, perhaps this can offer some kind of a perspective at a different angle at these things, and a healthier lifestyle that perhaps you didn't quite necessarily see before. So shortly coming will be that. I of course very much appreciated Ben coming on to the podcast, and it was a real blast to have him on here. And if you happen to be new to the Iblis Manifestations podcast, first of all, welcome. We have very nuanced and in-depth conversations with artists of all kinds, predominantly within heavy metal culture, So if you wanted to go and check out any of the back catalog after listening to this episode, you're more than welcome to do that. We've got episodes with artists from bands such as Tribulation, Incantation, Darvaza, Miss Therming, Iblis, and the list goes on. So, and if you do, of course, enjoy this content, feel free to share it and subscribe, and just let us know your thoughts and your feedback. It is very much appreciated. So, I'm going to keep this one short and cut straight to the chase and let you guys enjoy the episode. Okay? And of course, if you check the link for Iblis Manifestations, you will also see that my band Trivax, we're releasing a new album on the 29th of September. It is titled Iloa Burns Out, and we currently have our newest single, Azrael, out on YouTube, Spotify, and pretty much everywhere that you can find it. So I would very much appreciate it if you have a spare minute to check that out as well. So now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ben Ward to Iblis Manifestations. Okay, Ben, good evening, man, and welcome to Iblis Manifestations. What a pleasure to have you on here. Finally, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, not doing too bad.
That's good to hear, man. You were just telling me before we came on that you've had quite a bit of a busy month with your festivals and whatnot recently.
Yeah, obviously, I play in Orange Goblin and work as a booking agent. So I'm a one-man operation with 37 clients, I think it is at the moment, juggling.
Right on.
So yeah, it's a busy period of the year. Obviously, all the big festivals are going off across Europe at the moment. But no complaints from me. Having sort of struggled through COVID a few years ago, when there was nothing happening, it was a difficult time for everyone in the music industry. So to have a summer of festivals is fantastic for everyone. So yeah, I'm not going to gripe about it too much. It's tiring. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of admin involved, but it's great, and especially as a performer with Orange Goblin, being back on stage and getting to play some of the big festivals. It's been a great summer so far. We've got a little break now, so I'm going to make the most of that and enjoy some downtime.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, I've seen some of the shows you guys have been playing, and it's just been looking crazy. And to your point as well, I didn't realize you had that many clients. I mean, I manage just my own band, and that's a lot. And and it's like obviously there's more to it for me personally than just arranging the shows. Like there's a lot of different aspects involved. But even that, when you're working with professional musicians, especially, that's a lot. And it's something that needs to be consistent. And you need to keep that going. And obviously it's your business to do that, and
Yeah,
I admire that, man. That's a lot of work, and I think to your point as well, when you're saying just from everything that happened with COVID, and what we're doing now, I guess there's a certain degree of sometimes giving time to doing what you don't really want to do to be able to do what it is that you do want to do, I guess.
yeah. I mean, as a booking agent, we now involved in band strategies, and I say I've got 37 clients, but not all 37 of them are, you know, out there working currently, because a lot of them are off album cycle and in the studio recording, and we start prepping for next year and things like that. So at any given time, there's sort of 50% of my clients are actively touring or out doing festivals. So I kind of learned very quickly when I started running Route One Booking what I can and can't do, which is, I'm inundated on a daily basis with bands asking for representation, and I just have to be honest with them and say, this is how I operate, and I don't have time. And I like to be honest, because yourself being in a band, you want someone that can dedicate time and attention and make your band a priority. And I like to prioritize all of my clients. There isn't a single band that is a singular priority for me. I like to give every artist the exact same amount of time and attention. So yeah, I know what I can handle. I don't want to spread myself too thin. I want to be able to do the best job possible for all of them. And like I say, right now it's in a really good place. I, I I used to work at a company called UTA, which was previously the agency group. And when I started there in 2015, I was basically given a computer, a phone, and a desk, and they said, it's over to you, sort of thing. There was nothing, and I had to build a roster from scratch. So to be where I am now and be looking after clients such as Fu Manchu and Earthless and Voivod and Orange Goblin, and there's so much exciting stuff on my roster, and I like to keep it kind of diverse. I do everything from the stoner rock bands I just mentioned through to I've just signed a black metal band from Greece called Yotheria, who
Oh
I
yes.
really very much. It's Jim Mutilator's band, who's previously in Rotting Christ, and
I actually had the Magus on this podcast just about a few
all
episodes
right,
ago.
yeah,
Yes.
vocalist, yeah. Then I mean, when I heard As the Flame Withers a couple of years ago, that album blew me away. So I
Yeah.
was very keen to work with them. I dropped them an email at the time, and it took them a while to get back to me, but I think things are moving in the right direction for those guys now. So I'm chuffed to be on board with that. And yeah, I do everything from, right through to Shooter Jennings, the country and western star who's actually having more success in the States at the moment as a producer, having worked recently with the likes of Brandy Carlisle and Marilyn Manson. It's very diverse what he does. And I represent a lot of bands in just the UK and Ireland, like sub-agenting for other agencies. I do a lot of stuff for the likes of I Hate God and Midnight and
Yeah.
The Upset and things like that. So,
All the good
it's a lot.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a fan of music first and foremost, and being able to work with some of these bands is like an honor for me. It's, I'm a fan of them. So when I get the opportunity to book shows for them, I jumped at it. And doing it for money is secondary to working with bands you love. So I'm very fortunate that having spent the best part of 30 years working in the music industry, I still get to, I'm my own boss. I work from home, and I only work with bands that I have a passion for and dig. So yeah, it's not a bad job at all.
That's fantastic, man. Well, listen, there's a lot that I want to uncover with you here, and there's a lot of different areas that we can go into. But I just kind of want to cut straight to the chase here, if you will. And obviously, first of all, actually, I should probably mention that we actually met before, I think sometime around 2017. We shared the stage together in, what was it? The Slade Room in Wolverhampton back in November 2017. Yes, and you guys headlined that on that day, and I was actually doing double duties on that day, and then the drummer from one of my bands broke his ankle, so I ended up just doing the one show. But then I don't know. Anyway, it's a long story. It's the only time where we had to pull out of a show that one time. But I remember that being a pretty sort of chaotic but cool evening of just like pure rock and roll down in the Midlands.
It was a strange one. I remember the festival because I remember the poster. They'd made this sort of pirate ship with us as characters on it, and I remember us taking the piss out of our bass player for how they'd made him look.
I remember that. I think I might have a copy of that poster here somewhere. It's this very cartoonish looking one with like some pink background.
Strange show, but it was a good show. It was a very eclectic bill. I mean, we've always had a good time in Wolverhampton. Our drummer's from Wolverhampton, so he likes going back there. And I do remember that very well.
Yeah. No, it was a very interesting show. So that was actually, I think I saw you just at the HRH you did in Sheffield just before that, and then we shared the stage in Wolverhampton where I met you, and it's great. I really enjoy what you do with Orange Goblin, because I think you are it's one of those things where if you want to look at albums, you guys very much obviously fit into the stoner doom kind of style, that sort of the Black Sabbath esque style of metal and things like that, which is fantastic. That's great. But I think when it comes to a live performance, you guys are very engaging. I mean, you are like a natural entertainer, so I think you can still come and watch your show whether you're wearing a Black Sabbath shirt or a Niflheim shirt. You can still take away a degree of enjoyment from that. So there is a lot we could uncover in that area. But what I really am curious and I want to speak to you about is your personal transformation, which you have been through in the last year or so. So for anyone who is listening who might have lived under a rock and might not seen what it is that you've been able to do, you've gone through an insane physical transformation, lost a ton of weight, and you also became sober from my understanding. So this is really something that I'm interested in. So just take us through this. To begin with, what even prompted the decision to go down this path?
Well, I mean, anyone that knows me will know that I had a bit of a reputation as being a little bit wild, always liked to drink and partake in other substances that sort of would help keep the party going, shall we say. And I think probably during COVID and lockdown, things kind of escalated and started to get out of control. And it wasn't just having a detrimental effect on my health, my mental health. It was having a detrimental effect on my professional life as a booking agent. It was having an effect on my personal life with my wife. It was a bit of everything really, and I knew that those, unless you're Lemmy, those sort of lifestyles just you can't maintain that. And I needed to make changes for my health, for my well-being, my business, and everything. So I just pulled the plug, and everyone kind of doubted that I'd be able to keep it up. And I've got to be honest, I didn't find it too hard. I'd set my mind on going sober, and in order to do so, I employed a personal trainer who's been very good at implementing routines, which was the main thing. I'd fallen into a lifestyle of not having any routine. I'd just fall off the rails and go on 4-day benders and things like that, and it was costing me days of work and things like that. So I knew I needed to get a strict regime in place, and being in fitness yourself, you'll know that having those routines are what help you develop that structure. So I knew that by having a personal trainer, there'd be no temptation to go back to the drink, because I'd be wasting my money. So I listened to them, and I have no regrets about it. The only thing I do regret is that I hadn't done it sooner, because I've never felt more alive. I've been sober now for pretty much 16 months. And as you say, in that time, I've lost 23 kilos in weight. I'm approaching 50 years old next year, and I feel fitter and stronger than I ever have. I'm fitting in clothes that I used to wear when I was sort of 20 years old. It's great, especially now that those vintage t-shirts go for so much money. So it's a lifestyle that, I'm not one of these people to preach to everybody, because I've been through it. I've done everybody's fair share of partying. So, I don't feel as if I've got anything to prove. People say, "Oh, I can't believe you don't drink anymore. That's not very heavy metal." It's like, I do not care about that anymore. I'm more concerned with having a pleasant life for me, my son, my wife, and people around me. They got to a point where I wasn't very pleasant to be around. I would get violent when I was drunk. I'd get aggressive, and just become an arsehole. And now, being able to take a step back in sobriety and observing how people are when they're drunk, it makes me think, Christ, was I like that? And people are like, you were worse. And I'm like, Jesus. So, it's been very eye-opening, and it's a lifestyle that I recommend to anybody to just give it a go. If you read a lot more now about musicians that are struggling with their mental health, and a lot of that is because if you're a touring musician, you think there's nothing else to do but sit around with a can in your hand, or partake in whatever substances are about. And there is more to life to it, and that goes back to them routines. Is like, when we was going away and doing festivals with Orange Goblin last year, and when we went on tour in Germany, we was on a bus, and in the past, I'd have been up all night partying and then slept all day until sound check, and repeat over and over again. And you don't get to see any of the world. I've been to some amazing places in my career with Orange Goblin. I've been all over the USA. I've been all over Europe. I've been to Japan and Australia, and I'm very fortunate to do that. But I'm sort of sat there reflecting, thinking, I haven't really sort of explored these places and gone to check out the cultures and the sites and things like that. And now that I'm sober, I'm up at 7 o'clock every morning, and I'm going out and going for a walk and visiting these cities and finding that there's so much more to life. And whereas in the past I might have sort of spent my time drinking or messing about, I go for a walk, I get my steps in, or I have a little sort of training session, banded session, or body weight session, and keep myself active that way. And it's beneficial. And it's not just, good for your mental health, but my performance on stage with Orange Goblin, I feel stronger in my voice, I feel fitter in my performance, and there's no downside to it. So, like I say, I'm not going to preach to people and say you have to do this, but I can, testify to the benefits of it.
Yeah, I could not agree with you anymore. And first off, congratulations, man. That's fucking awesome. It's great to hear a story like that, and
the thing that people got to consider as well is that this is something that by the time you get into your 30s, then 40s, then 50s, this only becomes more difficult. So the fact that you've done this now, I think it's fantastic, and I think it's safe to say that it's probably given you like a new lease on life. And I say this a little bit presumptuously because that's what it was like for me as well. Because I went through a similar thing as well. I used to be about 119, 20 kilos. Never been to gym in my life. Same deal. Alcohol, drugs, just having no control, whether it was mentally or physically, just a mess, But I thought that's what artists were supposed to be like. And
you kind of made to feel like that way in heavy metal. That the more sort of destructive you are to your own well-being, the cooler it is. And it doesn't have to be that way. Some of the coolest musicians that I look up to are very strict about their lifestyle. You look at the likes of Bruce Dickinson. I mean, I saw Iron Maiden recently on tour, and that guy's like been through throat cancer. He's 65, 66 years old, and he's running around like a lunatic. He sounds better than ever, and you think that's a guy that looks after himself, and he's an inspiration to people, and I'd like to sort of try and be a bit more like that as I get older. It's, as you say, being in the music industry, it's very hard because there's these stereotypes that as a young man you feel you have to live up to, and I certainly did. I fell into that trap when I started in my journey as a musician. I thought it was really cool to just be drunk all the time and take all the drugs that came my way. And it's fun for a while. I'm not going to lie. I had some good times as well. It's not all bad.
Sure.
But you get to a certain age and you have certain responsibilities where you just need to calm down and start looking after yourself. And it's a personal choice. It's up to whoever. So, for me, it's working so far, and I can't see that I'll ever sort of go back. In fact, I'm so far into it now that I'm studying to become a PT myself, and I have ideas that I want to sort of help other musicians somewhere along the line, and see if I can put something good back into the industry.
Very interesting, man. There's one thing as well that you alluded to this earlier, but you said that like some people might say, "Oh, you stopped drinking. That's not heavy metal." Well, to me, the whole essence of heavy metal is about freedom, and there's nothing liberating like taking your own health in your own hands and taking control of your own life and becoming disciplined, because discipline is freedom, and without it you have nothing. So to me, doing that is heavy metal as fuck, basically.
It is. I mean, as you say, heavy metal and punk and black metal and everything has always been about that freedom of expression and the act of rebellion. So by being different to other people, you're being rebellious in your own way. So, if anything, it's more heavy metal to go against the grain. So
it's like a niche within a niche almost.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's it, man. And I think that's fantastic. And like I said, it's not to preach, but I totally relate to what you're saying, where it's like, just to go back to what I was saying about myself. So I used to be about 119 kilos. Right now, that's about 4 or 5 years in between. So I've had a lot of time to obviously work with this. But at the moment, this morning, I was 76 kilos. Wow. And that's, that's just... I almost feel like until the last few years, I never even lived. And it's only something like the more you go on, the focus that you get from doing this, the discipline that you get. And because people might look at it from the outside if they've never done something like this, because this is how I used to look at it. I would look at people in the gym whenever like we were like driving past, and you look at everyone in the window, and I would look at them and thinking, oh, these egotistical bastards, like they're just there feeding their own egos and their social medias and their bullshit empty lives. Exactly. But then you do it and you realize, oh wait, hang on a minute, this is simply a tool that once you have it, you can enrich your own life. And what it does for your mental health is that to me is like 95% of it, and the rest of it is like the physical side is almost a bonus the fact that
Yeah.
you get to get in shape and get better.
It's interesting that you say there about the discipline involved, because I think the discipline that's required to improve your physical health is so important to apply to your mental strategy in your everyday life. I read this book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, I think it is. I can't remember his name entirely,
Okay,
but
yeah.
Atomic Habits was his book, and it's about setting up those routines. Whereas you used to sort of, think it was normal to go out and have 15 pints and then get a kebab on the way home. That would have been your ritual on a Friday night. It's like that you don't have to do that. You can set up these new routines that are, beneficial to you, and that's why I struggled with my entire life, was having that kind of discipline and that order, because we're rebellious by nature with the heavy metal thing, and you wouldn't want to sort of think, I'm not being told what to do, or when I should eat, or when I should, and having that kind of almost military discipline, I find it really sort of uplifting, and I like being in the kitchen prepping my food, knowing that's what I've got Monday, that's what I've got Tuesday, that's what I've got, and having that routine, and it's a feeling of sort of satisfaction when you've done your jobs and your duties every morning. It's like, I like to be up at the crack of dawn, go to the gym, get my routine out of the way, whatever it is, whether I'm doing legs or upper that day, do my steps, and then be home by 8 o'clock in the morning, knowing that that's all out of the way. And now I'm sort of mentally prepared for my working day, and I'm like, I buzz off that, and it just feeds each other. It's a great place to be.
I agree. It's very interesting to me. I am relating to this in a very special way, but also that I very much is something that I do identify with, and it's that when you say that when you're rebellious by nature, and you're like, don't tell me what the fuck to do, I live my own life, I'm free. And that's at its root, it's a great thing, but it needs the proper tools in order for the proper expression of such a series of emotions and characteristics. Which, like I said, I do very much relate to. But also, what I think is that generally those of us who do get into this style of music, or those of us who follow a certain path, especially the ones that get involved in performing metal music, now that doesn't have to be black metal or death metal, whatever. It's just that urge to want to do such a thing, which in some sense has very little reward, but then the rewards aren't really always something that, it's not always a substance you can just hold in your hand and show it to people. It is something that you feel. It's the legacy that you feel, that you leave behind, and the experiences. But for me, I feel that at our core, those of us who follow these kind of paths always have this fire that we have to express, that there's a need. It's not even a want, but there's a need to express and to push ourselves into the world. And I find that with the certain elements of this culture that come to it, the drinking and the drugs are ways where we're almost like running out of room of, well, I don't know how else to express myself, so I'm going to put my energy into this. Right. And that's because there's that, once again, lack of discipline, because that's what I felt like when I was drinking, when I was doing the whatever drugs and whatnot, and I'm not against all drugs. I'm very pro psychedelics, as I've spoken on here previously. But when it comes to certain things, like let's say cocaine or speed, which is like, if you're a Motorhead fan, you got to at least try speed once. So, so when you're into that kind of stuff, it feels like you have to put that energy into that. Whereas really, it's something that just takes away your energy and it doesn't give you anything in return.
I think I can see now that I was kind of hiding, but I was using it to hide behind, because I didn't have the confidence to be myself. Whereas now I feel like I've come out of a shell and I can actually express myself and who I really am. I found my true self. And, it's interesting that you said that the people that perform, whether it's, heavy metal or any kind of performance, you need to have that genuine fire. And I used to kind of, I don't know, I'd drink because I thought it would give me a sort of sense of courage or something to get up on stage and do what I do. And people used to say, "Oh, how are you going to perform without having a drink?" And I have found that there's a natural adrenaline now that's a far better feeling than any drink or drug could ever give me. And I love being on stage now because for an hour and a half, I lose myself genuinely in the music, and I have that pent up aggression that I can let out. I have this energy that's flowing through me, and it's a feeling that I've never experienced before because it had always been numbed by something else. And like you say, that fire that burns within us, it's a natural thing that we have to get out. It's a natural release. And people have always said to me, people that don't understand the scene that we're in, they've always said, "Oh, when are you going to be on Top of the Pops? And why don't you make a song that the radio plays?" Like, because that's not what's in me. What's in me is what comes out. That's what I'm passionate about. That's why we do it. And any sort of art, whether it's music, whether it's sculpture, whether it's painting or whatever, any genuine good art has to come from a dark place. You need to have sort of been to the darkest depths to see the light and come out the other side with something that is passionate and has feeling.
Absolutely, man, 100%.
And that's why I feel like I've been to those dark places now, and it's going to be interesting now working on a new Orange Goblin album, the first album of our career, and our 10th studio album, where I'm going to approach it from a completely different standpoint. Because in the past, I've written lyrics about drinking. We've got songs called Alka-Fuel and glorifying the booze and the drugs and that sort of thing. And now I'm coming at it from a completely different angle. And I'm not going to be preaching to people, and it's going to be a boring kind of, I don't know, Dave Mustaine Christianity sort of thing. It's going to be me just explaining my side of things and where I went to and how I sort of saw things and came out the other side. And I'm fortunate that I have come out the other side because there's a lot of great artists that don't have that opportunity. They get so dragged into it and it kills them. So I feel lucky that I'm able to see this side of things and tell my story and enjoy my life as I am at the moment.
I 100% agree with you, man. And I'm really glad that you have made it to this side of things, actually. This was actually going to be, oddly enough, my next sort of question to you was that obviously you've released all the albums that you've released up until now, with the last one being the Wolf Bites Back, I believe. And
yes.
And that was like about 5-6 years ago now. So
2018, yeah.
2018. Okay, so you've released all these albums, but I feel like you are now at a point where you have a completely different perspective than you did to all of the previous albums. So I'm very curious as to how the results will play out for this, because I find that when you go through that change, especially, I have also eliminated alcohol from my life as well as other substances. And I also feel that there's this, it only gets better with time. Like there's this like level of focus, level of presence where you're alive. Like when you're talking about being on stage without anything in your system and all you feel is that primal adrenaline, where you're performing to your tribe, essentially, and that feeling, there's something in our DNA that
nothing beats that.
Nothing beats that. Is the best feeling in the world.
That natural adrenaline and that, like you say, that primal sort of connection that you have with the audience, and that everybody there is into the same thing and shares that same passion.
Absolutely, and you're not in this vehicle of another person experiencing it, which is a lot of time what it feels like when you're under the influence. But you are there in full presence and soaking it all in. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think
this album is going to be interesting. It's not only the first album with me kind of approaching it from a sober point of view, but it's also the first album we've done with a new bass player, Harry, after our only ever lineup change. So it's fresh and it's exciting, and and the direction it's going in, it's incorporating elements of everything we've done throughout our career. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. And for me personally, I'm particularly excited about it because we're now working with Peaceville Records, which, growing up sort of listening to metal in the early 90s and being influenced by bands like Paradise Lost and Anathema and My Dying Bride and those sort of gloomy doom bands from Northern England, to be on the same label as them and Autopsy and Dark Throne, it's a massive thrill for me. So yeah, we're excited about this one.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and then Peaceful have got a great reputation as well for artistically leaving the bands and the artists to basically just do what they want.
They have, yeah. They've been brilliant so far. I mean, that was one of the reasons we signed for them. It was just, there was no pressure from them. There was no kind of, you need to make an album that sounds like this or anything like that. It was just, you do what you do, and we have complete trust in you. And they've just let us get on with it, basically. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to hearing this, and it almost feels like we get the opportunity to be given like a new Orange Goblin, almost. Like you're still the same fantastic musicians and everything, but it's almost like there's this sort of skin shedding, or like the phoenix rising from the ash that we're kind of really getting to experience now.
Orange Goblin, it will always be Orange Goblin. It's the culmination of the four individual sort of influences. That's never going to change. I mean, Joe, the guitar player, he comes from like a blues and 70s rock background. He loves, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Jimi Hendrix, as well as stuff like Muddy Waters and Buddy Rich and things like that. So he's always going to bring that sort of bluesy element to it. Whereas Chris, our drummer, came from a kind of old school punk and hardcore background. He's a big fan of stuff like Black Flag and Misfits and Discharge and Heresy and Concrete Socks and bands like that. And me and Martin previously would come from a more, straight up heavy metal background with love of Slayer and Metallica and Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and the more extreme stuff like Napalm Death and Carcass and Obituary, bands like that we were into as kids. So there's always been a really good melting pot of stuff, and Harry's, no different to any of us. He loves it all as well. He's a huge Voivod fan. He was telling us stories the other day. This is, showing his age. In '86, within the space of a week, he saw Slayer on the Raining Blood tour. He saw Motorhead on the Orgasmatron tour. He saw Metallica on the Master of Puppets tour. So he brings a certain element to the band that we need as well. So it's going to be a typical Orange Goblin album, but with a new approach, I suppose.
Jesus, I'm still trying to get over that seeing Slayer, Metallica, and Motorhead in one go in '86. What the fuck?
Yeah, the Apollo. No, it was called the Hammersmith Odeon back then. But I was like, how can you ever top that?
I know, right? That's like so many people all across the world, millions of people would probably, if you gave them a time machine, they would probably just want to experience something like that, myself included, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I was a bit too young then. Not by much, but I didn't live in London. I missed out on those great weeks in London and a lot of the cool tours that happened in mid '80s. So,
man, I would have loved to have experienced the scene over here at that time, because obviously I only moved out of Iran in towards the end of 2011. So I've been here just over 1 decade now, and it's been good because I've pretty much in this time sort of had my dream come true of getting to see and meet so many of my favorite bands, that I never thought I would be able to see, and this is obviously not including the ones that have passed away, like Death or Dissection or Bathory, for example, although I don't think he was ever going to play live anyway. But I would have loved to have experienced the scene in London, say in like the 80s or maybe even like up to early 90s. That would have been so cool.
Yeah, I mean, going to gigs in the early 90s, I remember seeing like shows at the Marquee and seeing sort of Cannibal Corpse for the first time, and Deicide and Obituary, and it was a golden time. And I missed the Dissection return show when Watain supported them in London. For some reason, I didn't go, and I'm gutted that I didn't go, because I think that was the last time Dissection played in London, and then obviously John died. But yeah, there's always been good stuff in London. We're very fortunate, and that's kind of, one of the reasons that Orange Goblin did so well in our career was that we were London based and we could get onto shows. I mean, obviously, I have admiration for you sort of growing up in Iran, and I know the climate couldn't have been easy for you then as a heavy metal fan, and how it was sort of viewed. So respect to you for that.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Yeah, so for me, the thing that was always crazy was that once I was actually in Iran, like you might laugh at this, but I never even thought I would be able to watch any gigs ever. Like I used to watch these bootleg DVDs of all these other bands, like you said, Cannibal Corpse, or even Cradle of Filth, or those bands, or even Mayhem. Used to have these bootleg DVDs when I was like 14, 15 years old in Iran, and I used to watch them. And I was used to just look at all those guys and be like, wow, they're made of something completely different to what I've ever met or what I've been around, because it's a heavily Islamic country that you're surrounded by, and it's not that, I didn't particularly have an uncomfortable life when it came to certain things like, like I still went to school, and we always had food on the table, but culturally I always felt starved, if that makes sense, because I wanted metal. That's the thing that I wanted to pursue in my life, and it just was not compatible. So for me, it's like every time I'm here and every time I'm just stood there hanging around with someone whose music I used to listen to however many years ago as a teenager, who I used to think is an alien, and now I'm just stood here talking to them as a friend. Yeah. I'm always like, I act cool on the outside, but on the inside, I'm always a little bit like, I gotta pitch myself. I
mean, I've got to meet a lot of the people that I consider heroes as well, and I try and keep up that sort of cool posterior on the outside, but it's on the inside it's all jelly and don't know what to say. And it's like, oh my god, I met James Hetfield when we played we did Soundwave Festival in Australia a few years back. Standing side stage watching Caius Libs, and turn around and there's James Hetfield standing beside me, and sort of as a kid growing up, Metallica were like it, and Hetfield was, oh my god, and to be in his presence was sort of, and I kind of started shaking to know what to say, and there's still moments you have like that. I've been very fortunate in my career that I've met Lemmy, I've met Ozzy, and I've met pretty much everyone I'd consider to be people that are heroes. Met Steve Harris briefly, which was kind of an amazing moment as well. But yeah, I still get that feeling of sort of being in the presence of royalty, sort of thing, when you do meet them.
Fuck yeah, man! I couldn't agree more. That Hetfield one, did you get to speak to him when he was there?
I can't remember what exactly came out of my mouth, but I sort of shook his hand and it was kind of like a thank you for everything, sort of thing. And he was sort of eating chow mein or something while he was watching the band and sort of singing along. It was pretty cool.
That's fucking killer, man. I think he's probably the last person remaining that who I would consider it would be important for me to maybe have some exchange with at some point in my life, because he was the reason why I ended up doing all of this. It was this weird moment
me too, really. I mean, talk about band. Metallica were that band that really sort of introduced me to it, and I was late comer, and it was sort of Justice for All era that I fell in love with the band, and it was the first metal T-shirt I had was the Justice for All shirt with the 4 faces on, and then cool. Seeing them in '93 on the Black Album tour and just being absolutely blown away by them. It was kind of life-changing experience. So, I'm not really sort of drawn to what they're doing now. I don't mind it. I think, there's a lot of opinions about the new material, and I'll be honest, I haven't really sort of listened to it enough to have my own opinion on it. But, what they did on those first 4 albums, and arguably the Black Album too, by changing how metal is perceived by the rest of the world. I mean, we owe them a massive debt.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I always say this, like you get these, and this might seem a little harsh to some of the other people, but you really have to pay attention to the perspective, and even if I wasn't a fan of Metallica, which I can't imagine that, to be honest with you, because, like they unlocked a connection to music for me that I never even knew existed. But, even if I wasn't a fan, just purely looking at it from outside, all these death metal bands, all these drummers that do their blast beats and whatever, that's great. But then you'll hear them shitting all over Lars, saying like, oh yeah, his snare sounds crap. Oh yeah, he can't do double bass. Oh, he can't do that. Well, all of you wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for a guy like him, So I think it's important to pay respects, especially I think, and to me, it's like, they fucking blew off the doors so hard for everyone, and this still includes the other bands in the Big Four as well, because they're sort of like, they sort of surpassed just being a band. Yeah, they became something else completely.
Yeah, they did. They kind of took metal to the mainstream, if you like, with the Black Album, and it was much needed. It, as you say, it opened doors for more extreme bands as well, because I'm pretty certain that a lot of those death metal bands around that time weren't selling as many copies as they do nowadays, because kids naturally want to get more extreme in their tastes, and anybody that was kind of listening to Metallica and then sort of fell out of love with Metallica around Load went digging for something more extreme, and probably fell in love with death metal, and it's a knock-on effect that all those bands have, and it's similar, like you say, Metallica get criticised now the same way as the Beatles get criticised as well. But without the Beatles, we wouldn't have had Black Sabbath, we wouldn't have had Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, all those bands. So everything has its place and its meaning in the timeline of music.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree, and I agree. And just one point as well, and this is my personal opinion. I don't know what's your take on this, but you said how Metallica became mainstream from the Black Album. I think bands, especially like Metallica and Iron Maiden, which as far as like commercialism within heavy metal is concerned, are like right at the top. And obviously Black Sabbath as well. These bands, I feel, they're never... I don't think they're quite mainstream, but they're so fucking big that the mainstream has to coexist with them.
I agree. I know exactly what you mean. It's like, Metallica now, who are arguably the biggest ticket selling band in the world, but you still don't hear them on Radio 1 every day. They don't need one. It's because, and that's what's great about the rock and the metal community, is that the loyalty is always going to be there and support those kind of bands. Whereas, you might have like dance music and urban artists or whatever's flavour of the month in the charts these days. It's a flash in the pan. It'll come and it'll go and it'll be forgotten. And no one will remember the name of an album or the name of a song that they had 20 years from now. Whereas people are always going to remember the likes of Metallica or Black Sabbath or even Slayer, and the rock community will remember. And that's what we do. We go to bars and we argue about what's your favourite Slayer album and things like that. And even now, so it's like you say, I agree. It's not really mainstream at all, but it's popular and it sells a lot of tickets, and that's great. That's long may that continue.
I agree. Yeah. That's why I've always, this might be ad nauseum for some of the other people hearing me talk about this, but when you get stuff like Stranger Things, I am absolutely fine with that, because you never know. The 13, 14-year-old that's going to discover Metallica through that is possible that they might at some point in the future want to dig in deeper, and then down the rabbit hole they go, because that's how it works out for all of us. It was like that for me. I discovered Metallica, and then about 7-8 months later, I'm listening to De Mysteries Dum Satanas, and then my life just changed even further. And that can happen. That 14-year-old kid that might hear Metallica on Stranger Things now might eventually at some point end up discovering Blasphemy or Beherit, and that's fine. Like you said, long may it continue. But I also have to ask you as well, as someone who's been involved with the industry for as long as you have,
Yeah.
Where do you see this going? Because it seems very sort of like, like for me, when it comes to being sort of having an optimistic vision for my own band and for my own music and for what we do and the genre as a whole, that optimism never goes away because there's an undying passion for it. But there's also a sense of logistics involved, and how much it costs bands, especially to do tours with nightliners where you literally just, if you're a big enough band, you still need to do the first half of the tour just to break even on your costs. So where do you see this going for everyone?
I think it's hard to say, but I think a lot of those kind of the modern concerns that you mentioned, like costs of touring and carnets and things like that we never used to have to consider pre-Brexit, I think they're offset by the technological advances that we have now. Bands, it's far easier for bands to market themselves on a worldwide scale with the advancement of the internet and things like GarageBand, where you can record at home to a professional standard.
Mm-hmm.
When we first started back in '94, we was having to go to the studio, record a 3-track demo, and then get involved in a tape trading scene and become pen pals with people, sending letters all over Europe and getting our music heard that way. But whereas these days it's a lot easier to do that side of things. But as you say, I think it will always kind of even out. I think the bands that have the genuine passion and the desire to make it will make it if they believe in what they're doing, and that's what it's all about, really, is having that belief and that dedication to your art. So you kind of, the cream rises to the top, they say, but it's not so much the cream, but it's if a band wants to succeed, they can succeed, and it can be a long journey. It can be a 5-minute rise to the top, as some bands are fortunate to find. But it's a journey nonetheless. And what better way is there of kind of spending your life than pursuing something you love? And Orange Goblin haven't ever sort of made it to the kind of levels that we might have hoped when we first started the band, but I wouldn't change a thing. I've had some amazing times with this band, and it's been an experience, and not once have I ever felt that we've had to sell out or anything like that. And we've maintained our kind of our dignity and our legacy, and we can be very proud of that. So it's not always about selling millions of albums. It's about the integrity and the journey you've had to achieve your goals.
I think that's a great insight, man. And I think when we talk about true, I think that's what people are referring to, because it's that passion that's within it, and that's what sort of that's what drives this train.
It separates the genuine, passionate, like you say, true people from the posers and the fakes, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's also because you mentioned the pandemic earlier, and how obviously that was a very tough couple of years for everyone, and I think what sucked about that so much, I mean, now it almost feels like it never happened, even though it did, I think everyone almost just wants to forget that, oh yeah, we did go through that, and it technically wasn't that long ago, but it was still long enough. And it's sort of like, I remember the feeling of not being sure if I was ever going to get to play live shows again,
Yeah.
And
I had that feeling for a little while there. It was kind of like, are we ever going to get to do this? And if we do, will it ever be the same? Are we going to play into these socially distanced venues where everyone's going to be wearing a mask and not allowed to stand and interact with each other? Because, ever since I was old enough to go to shows, that's the one thing I've loved about heavy metal fans, is that feeling of camaraderie and family and unity within the audience, that we're all there. And, we've got a song called The Filthy and the Few, and I always dedicate to the crowd, and I always say that this is for you, because we're all one and we're the same, in that, normal society doesn't regard heavy metal and rock as normal people. We look down as outsiders or freaks or something like that. And And I love that. I love being the outsider. I love being the
Yes.
freak, the underdog, and that's what I've always loved about heavy metal, and that essence that, you know, we might be fewer in numbers, but we're stronger in spirit and togetherness.
Absolutely, man. That is the feeling, you know, and it's like it's sort of like you find your own identity. You go through very personal journeys for this
People
in
accept
order
you for who
to,
you are. Yeah, people
yeah,
accept you for who you are in heavy metal, and it can be people from all walks of life. I mean, look at how, you know, a young kid from Iran is now talking to a young kid from Margate, Kent, and we have
yes.
so much in common and shared journeys and things, and it's that heavy metal is what, you know, essentially brought us together.
Yeah, man, and it's fucking awesome. I think that's so cool. That was one of the first things that, well, not one of the first things, but one of the most important things that I noticed when I came here is realizing that, oh, okay, so with this thing, you might have a different upbringing, you might have gone through your own experiences. I mean, with human beings in general, I mean, without getting too fucking deep about it, you know, like everyone has their own unique fingerprint, you know, and the
Yeah,
same applies to personalities, the same applies to personal journeys. But what
yeah,
I think is so special about heavy metal is that you get to have your own journey and your own thing, you know, whether it's with relationships or your work or your own personal demons and triumphs and as well. You know, it's not all just negatives. But then
yeah,
you get to, through this vessel of heavy metal, connect with all walks of life, you know, and you get to
yeah,
share that levelness in your passion for this thing, which I
yeah.
think is a fucking beautiful thing. You
I
could
mean,
never find that somewhere else.
no, I'm nearly 50 years old, but I still get a buzz if I'm walking around the supermarket and I see some old guy wearing a bolt thrower t-shirt, and you just give him
Yes.
that sort of knowing nod, and you're like, yeah, he knows. He knows, he's one of us.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that's never going to go away.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, yeah, I do that thing all the time, you know, and my girlfriend's always like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, like just, you know, and I'm always like, no, no, let him know.
Yeah,
You know, but no, I
yeah,
think it's great, you know, and it's what sets us apart. And that's what I was saying was that, you know, even though we weren't sure if this was something we were going to be able to make our way through with COVID,
yeah,
what kept it going, I think, is purely just the passion, you know. And now I would arguably say that, at least for my band, our shows have been on a completely different level since that whole thing happened, since 2 years
yeah,
ago. So they're all better in terms of attendance, they're better in
yeah.
terms of merch sales, but they're also better just in terms of how we fucking perform. So
That's it. I think
yeah,
people did genuinely support bands, and they continue to do so. And I've noticed it as a booking agent as well. And like you say, the attendances at first, people were a little bit reluctant to purchase tickets for shows that they weren't sure were going to happen, but walk-ups were really good, and now that's still ongoing. And you know, touch wood, most of the tours that I'm booking at the moment are looking really strong, and I think the industry in general is back stronger than ever because of that uncertainty that we went through with COVID.
absolutely. Yeah. I will say though, because, you know, I think we do also, I think there's also room for criticism here as well. And I'm not in love with how some bands just cancel shows over nothing as well, because
Oh yeah,
that's something that erodes public trust in pre-sales, and then there's this vicious cycle that happens, and you know, promoters and festivals cancel shows because there's not enough pre-sales, and then fans stop buying pre-sales because they're worried it's going to get canceled, so it's not
yeah.
worth investing money in until last
I
minute.
mean, I see that from all sides of the industry, and there's certain artists that you can point the finger at because they have cancelled to save face that the tour's not doing well.
Yeah,
But you've also got the other side of the coin where promoters and festivals have done the same thing and left the bands in the lurch. So
yeah,
there's, you know, there's arguments for both sides of the coin there. But I think, you know, people need to understand that, you know, obviously nobody wants that to happen. No one wants cancellations, but you know, these are people's livelihoods on the line, whether you're an artist, whether you're a promoter, whether you're a booking agent. And, you know, we experienced that traumatic couple of years. I mean, I lost my job at UTA because of COVID, and I'm fortunate that I still do what I love with Route One booking. But it could always just disappear tomorrow. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to see music flourishing at the moment, and I encourage people to keep supporting underground music as much as they do the stadium rock band. So it's it's looking good at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, obviously it is much better. As I said, it's just that I don't. I think it's that part of me that just kind of is a little bit irked by a band, like a band personally, and they've got a good following, and you're speaking to the member of the band, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I can't really be asked driving to Ireland today," and then they put up a post the next day saying something like, "Oh yeah, due to unforeseen circumstances with health, we can't make it." It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
That's a phrase that's become very popular in the music industry, hasn't it? Due to unforeseen circumstances, because right. It's very much a cover up for, can't be bothered.
I know, and it's like, but then on the other hand, you get bands that go through absolute fucking hell just to make it to the show. Like you guys just did was it with Lufthansa when you were playing in Germany?
Yeah, we I mean, I've read some horror stories about bands having their luggage and guitars go missing from Lufthansa, and we were kind of dreading that flight. It was the only option we had to get to the festival we were playing, so we bit the bullet. We booked tickets with Lufthansa. Lo and behold, we arrived in Leipzig, but none of our luggage and guitars did. But we're fortunate that we've got a lot of contacts throughout our career, and people rallied around and got us guitars to play the show. But we've had all sorts of obstacles thrown in our way in the past, and I'm pretty confident that I can say that in sort of 28 years, Orange Goblin have never cancelled a show like last minute. We've always made a point of getting there. There have been a couple of times where certain sort of logistical circumstances have meant we've had to cancel, a good couple of months out. But we've never done that last minute sort of cancellation thing. We've always tried to honour our bookings, and because it's at the end of the day, we're talking about the artists and the promoters and the agents involved and things like that. But they're not the ones that suffer in the long run, because they're going to get the shows, they're going to get their commission, they're going to get their money from the ticket sales or whatever. It's the fans that miss out. Fans, that work 9 to 5 in their regular jobs, and they buy their tickets and they wait months and months to see their favourite bands, and then when at the last minute the artist pulls it out, it's crushing to them. And I know I'd be devastated if it was a band that I wanted to go and see. So it's the fans that you need to protect, and they're the lifeblood of the industry, really, because without them, no one else has a living.
I couldn't agree more, man. 100%. It's because of them that you get to basically live a dream, because it's like the way I always saw metal, especially, the fact that there's an industry around it. I feel like the industry just, it's an excuse just to be able to do the thing, just to be able to actually sustain doing it, otherwise there's like financially it just doesn't make sense that much.
And the fan bases aren't silly either. They can see how the music industry has evolved over the years. A band used to tour to promote an album, but now a band makes an album to promote a tour, because touring is where musicians earn their money these days. With the rise in streaming and platforms like Spotify paying what is it, 0.0001 pence per play or whatever it is to the artist. There's no money in that, and record companies know that. Record companies don't pay out these massive advances to bands now to do this. Everything's recoupable, and they line their own pockets, and the artist has to go out and tour to make a living. And that's why it kind of sickens me when you hear these stories about bands having to pay ridiculous concessions on their merchandise, which is essentially their earnings. There should be no such thing as a venue taking a cut of a band's merchandise, in my opinion. I don't care what the circumstances are regarding the venues and the promoters and things like that. It should just be 100% to the band, because they're the ones that have had to come up with the designs, they're the ones that have had to pay for the printing, they're the ones that have paid for shipping, all those sort of things. So for festivals and venues to take a cut of band's merchandise is completely out of order, if you ask me. And the only way to rectify that would be for the venues to start giving the bands a percentage of their bar takings.
I couldn't agree more, man. That's the second time you've read my mind in this conversation here, because that was going to be exactly what I was going to get into after this, is the merch cuts that the venues are doing. And I think it's wrong. It's just really fucked. And
I mean, they say that they're doing a service, but 9 out of 10 bands that turn up at a venue have someone to sell their merchandise for them anyway. So you don't need someone.
yeah.
It's robbery, basically robbery. So, like I say, if we could turn that on its head and get a percentage of the bar takings, because without the band performing that night, there'd be no one in their venue.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, I am also all for venues, especially the grassroots ones, being up and running, and we even, like, during I think the third lockdown, we did this whole campaign with my band where we basically did a live stream. It was the only time we did one, and probably the only time we will do it, but it was a good experience, which I do not regret, because we managed to donate. I mean, for our size of a band, I think it ended up coming to maybe a couple of grand donations to these grassroots venues. I was very pleased by that. I was very happy by that, because to me, I saw it as a way of, I've obviously come here from Iran, and then we've been using the free culture here. The least we could do is give back, other than just our performances. So I was very happy that we were able to do such a thing. But on the other hand, I think that when some of these venues, which is mainly, let's face it, it's mainly the corporate ones anyway. It's mainly like the O2s and stuff that are doing.
I'm not aiming my criticism at any grassroots venues, because I'm not aware of any grassroots venues that do charge a concession anyway. And as you say, those venues, they did a fantastic job to survive through COVID, and with no small thanks to people like Mark David at the MVT and Music Venues Trust, who I don't think just did an amazing job helping those venues survive, but did an amazing job making the everyday music fan aware of what's needed for those venues to survive. And now they're flourishing, and hopefully we're going to see the closure of we're going to see an end to the closure of venues across the country, because people now realise that without those small venues, where are your next headliners coming from? We need them to breed the talent. So it's essential. If you want to see a band in the O2 Arena, go and support them in the small 120 cap rooms like 5 years before that.
Yeah. I listen, man. Yeah, this also reassures me that I've understood the game correctly, because I've always been saying this to people, saying that in order to preserve this culture, you must protect the grassroots venues and all the rehearsal places and these places where kids and young bands can get into and start practicing together. Because like you said, where do you think all the biggest bands in the world have come from? Have they just started a band and then someone was like, okay, let's book him to headline Download or Hellfest or whatever? That's just not how anything works in this life. Even if you've got millions of dollars to start your project with, even then it's not going to work like that.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of find it refreshing when you see things like, even though I'm not a particularly massive fan of Motley Crue, but when you saw them doing a show at the Underworld, I thought that's fantastic. A band of that size going back in and playing face to face in a sweaty little venue as close to the crowd as you can get, and keeping it real is heartwarming to see stuff like that.
I thought that was pretty cool, man. I mean, we played the Underworld just around March, so only just a few months ago. So I get to say that I played the same venue as Motley Crue now.
yeah. You struck the same boards as Nikki Sixx.
That's it. Yeah, I remember thinking that. Did you ever go to Robana's in Birmingham before?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a really cool rehearsal place. I mean, I haven't been there for a little while, but there's this rehearsal place. It's like this sort of, it's like almost like a hotel, but with each room having like a drum kit and amps and stuff in it. Really great place. That's where Trivax kind of first grew up when I was in Birmingham at first, and we spent quite a few years there. And they have this like little warehouse next to it, and then this big warehouse, where it's like a rehearsal place, but then you can use it for multiple different functions. We actually shot our first music video there. And this was in February 2017, which was just around the time Black Sabbath did their very last show in Birmingham. Yeah, and they actually rehearsed in that warehouse there that we went to. And I remember going to the toilet, because there's only one toilet in the back, and just being there and like staring at it. And I called my drummer over. I'm like, Matt, get the fuck here. And then he was like, whoa, what's going on? I was like, look at this. Aussie Piston here. And he was like, oh yeah, shit, cool.
It's a good job you didn't say, oh, there's some shitty Black Sabbath covers band next door.
Nah. Oh yeah, that would have been crushing.
That's cool.
Yeah, man, you know, so stuff like that. That's what I was talking about to you earlier, you know, like, you know, just from coming from Iran and then like being present in a place like that. That's like, what the fuck is this? You know, you can't describe that feeling, you know. It's almost like the multiverse kind of merging somehow. It's really bizarre.
And these little things like that sort of justify why we dedicate our lives to music. It's the small little rewards like that mean so much.
Absolutely, man. I think that's everything. And yeah, like you said, that's what we do it for. Listen, brother, I do very much appreciate your time and you jumping onto the podcast tonight.
Real good time chatting with you.
Thank you, man. Likewise. And, you know, like I said earlier as well, I love that with what you have done, not just with Orange Goblin, but with your own personal journey, that you're inspiring other people to follow a similar path as well. Not directly, but just by leading by example. And I'm sure your inbox has probably been full of people reaching out to you saying, oh, I saw you do this, so now I've started doing this as well.
And it is, you know, it's nice to see that. And, you know, if you, like I said, I'm hoping that at some point I can sort of work out how to, you know, help other people in my journey as well. So yeah, I mean, that's not my prime reason for doing it, but when you do get that encouragement from people, you sort of think, yeah, I'm doing something right here. So it's been all positive so far, and you know, I'm excited now to see what the next chapter holds.
Awesome, man. Yeah, likewise. Looking forward to your next album as well, whenever that comes out. Is there anything, just before we round this up, is there anything you'd like people to keep an eye out for or to check out? Anything that you're currently involved with at the moment?
Well, not particularly, no. I mean, Orange Goblin is something that a lot of people are probably more than aware of. As I say, we've got a new album. We're going to the studio to start recording in November. The album should be out around May, June next year, and we're going to be getting out on the road to promote that. And, you know, in the meantime, I'll be busy booking shows all over Europe and all over the world with Route 1 booking. So, yeah, I mean, any band that is looking for a booking agent, don't be shy to reach out. I can't promise that I'll take it on, but I enjoy listening to new material, and you never know, you know, I might find that new Metallica that we're talking about. So
yes, absolutely, man. Fuck yeah. So yeah, Ben, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. And to everyone else listening to the podcast so far, hope you guys enjoyed this, and see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Cheers.